Hello and welcome to Philosophy Vibe, the channel where we discuss and debate different philosophical ideas. Today we're going to be looking into the theological theory of pantheism. Fascinating. Now, pantheism is a very unique approach to theism within the philosophy of religion. To give a brief summary, pantheism is the belief that God is in fact the universe. A pantheist rejects the idea of a transcendent God. A pantheist rejects the belief that God is something separate from the universe, that God is something above and beyond the cosmos. Rather, God and the universe are the same thing. The universe is God. The two are identical. Everything around us, the totality of reality, is the divine. God is everything and everything is God. I see. Now, the typical monotheistic religions see God as a personal God. By personal, we mean a God that has personhood, has its own identity, speaks in the first person, and shows emotion. A personal God is often depicted in an anthropomorphic way, given human-like qualities, not just in looks but in personality too. We hear of God's love, God's wrath, God's mercy, etc. Yes. Pantheism completely stands against this concept. Whilst pantheism is a theistic belief, or some may refer to it as a deistic belief, God is not seen in a personal way. Rather, the very reality we are in, everything we see, even the deep dark corners of the universe, this is God. Interesting. Pantheism has been around for many years. It can be said to have been included in a number of religions and mythologies over the centuries. It was in fact made prominent in the West by the philosopher Baruch Spinoza, among many others. Now, pantheism itself is quite a broad belief system, encompassing many different beliefs and theories within the one overarching doctrine. The purpose of this video is to give a broad look at the strengths of pantheism as a spiritual belief, as well as look at some of the philosophical problems that arise within this branch of theism. Great. Okay, I would like to propose three main arguments that show pantheism as the most logical and valid form of theism for one to adopt. The first is the classical religious approach. The second is the personal or individual approach, and the third is the scientific approach. Okay, starting with the classical religious approach. In traditional theism, God is described as being omnipresent. God is everywhere at all times. Now really, how can one distinguish from God being omnipresent in our reality to God actually being all of reality? What exactly is the difference? To say that God is everywhere all the time is to say that God is everywhere all the time. God is everything. This is then the pantheist approach. More so, classical theism adopts God as omniscient, meaning God knows everything. He has all knowledge of the past, the present, and the future simultaneously. Again, this is a type of temporal omnipresence, being all of time and all of space at once. Again, this is pretty much identical to the pantheist approach. If God is reality, then God is time, God is space, God is the whole cosmos at every moment, past, present and future, a very rational development to the classical theist approach. Very interesting. Also, the classical theists will often claim that the universe is dependent on the existence of God. God has to exist for the universe to exist, making the universe a part of God, basically synonymous. The logical next step is to equate the two. If God must exist for the universe to exist, then the universe does not seem like something separate from God, but in fact seems part of God, leading to the pantheistic approach. Yes, I understand. Moving on to the personal or individual approach. Many people often have a numinous experience by just seeing or experiencing parts of reality. It happens when we see a beautiful view of nature or a magnificent sight of the stars. We can feel it when we embrace the love of another person or even in a deep state of meditation. Many people say that they have felt God, or maybe just felt an extraordinary feeling. This experience is like an awareness of being part of something greater, and what better way to explain it than the simple fact that we are part of something greater. We are part of God. God is all of us and everything else. We are all part of the same infinite entity.
Yes, I see.
And finally, the scientific approach. The trouble with any traditional theology is that God is seen as being outside the universe, beyond space and time. Science then has no place in the affirmation or discovery of such a being, as science is solely the study of the empirical and observable universe. Any talk outside of human experience can be seen as redundant. However, should we agree that God is the universe itself, we can now inject meaning into this discussion.
Right.
So on a cosmic level, should we see the universe, or perhaps the multiverse, as actually infinite, something that has always existed, did not come into existence and will not cease to exist, can create matter ex nihilo and is responsible for all the laws of nature? Then this definition of the universe seems identical to the traditional belief in God, and we have good grounds to view the two as identical.
Very interesting. You have raised some great points as to why pantheism seems a reasonable and perhaps logical approach to theism. It almost functions as a great middle point between religion and spirituality and science.
Yes, exactly.
However, I want to now look at some of the philosophical problems with this theistic approach.
Very well.
Focusing first on the classical religious approach, I do not really see a difference between pantheism and atheism.
What do you mean?
Pantheism rejects a personal god, so does atheism. Pantheism rejects an anthropomorphic god, so does atheism. Pantheism accepts the physical universe and only the physical universe, so does atheism. So where exactly is the difference? Schopenhauer claimed that pantheism is only a euphemism for atheism, and to call the world God is not to explain it, it is only to enrich our language with a superfluous synonym for the word. I am inclined to agree. An atheist rejects God as the creator of the universe, they just accept that the universe exists. The pantheist has the exact same line of thought, but has just renamed the universe to God. This is just a linguistic difference and nothing more. There is nothing that separates God from everything else in our universe, so why even make the distinction? Pantheism and atheism ultimately remain the same thing.
I don't think this is necessarily true. Atheism is the rejection of God, whereas pantheism is saying that God is the universe.
I'm sorry, I don't see what the difference is.
I believe the difference will come down to consciousness. For the universe to be God, it means that the universe needs to possess a type of consciousness. Atheism would reject any form of consciousness outside a physical living body, whereas pantheism can reach out to consciousness as a way to bolden the theistic element of the belief.
So, according to the pantheists, the universe has consciousness. The universe itself has its own thoughts and feelings.
Not in a personal way with its own identity like a classical personal god, but rather in a higher level.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, firstly, let me reiterate that pantheism encompasses a wide set of beliefs, so there will be differentiations. However, a popular pantheistic approach to the universe's consciousness comes under the Panpsychism approach.
What is Panpsychism?
So, Panpsychism is the idea that consciousness, or you can say mind-like qualities, exist everywhere in the universe, in all things all the time. However, there are different levels and degrees of consciousness. The tiniest, most fundamental element of matter, right down to the subatomic level, also known as monads, will contain conscious qualities. However, these monads will vary in degrees of conscious strength. How conscious something is depends on how complex the entity is and how many strong conscious monads the entity contains. So, an inanimate object like a rock will have very weak conscious monads. A plant, slightly increasing in complexity, will contain slightly stronger conscious monads. An insect, a more complex organism, will then have slightly stronger conscious monads. An animal, even stronger conscious monads, and a human will of course have very strong conscious monads. This does make perfect sense, as we can see varying degrees of consciousness and sentience throughout our natural world. We can even go so far as to say humans themselves contain varying degrees of conscious monads, giving rise to the existence of super geniuses.
Right.
Now, the universe as a whole, the most complex and greatest entity, contains the total sum of all monads that exist, as well as the power to create these monads, which would make the universe the highest form of consciousness possible. Again, this is exactly how we understand the classical concept of God, but we are breaking it down to a more empirical understanding. God is therefore the total sum of all consciousness in the universe. It is not separate from the universe, it is the universe, but it obtains a greater level of consciousness, which means pantheism is vastly differentiated from atheism.
Okay, but this idea of monads still seems like a wild belief.
Perhaps, but I would say they are a physical belief rather than a metaphysical belief, and something we can hope for science to answer one day.
Very well, but from here we run into the problems for the personal approach.
How so?
If our consciousness is just part of a bigger complex entity, then how is it we have developed our own personhood with our own identity? I feel like my own person, my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own beliefs, my own emotions. I do not feel like my consciousness is part of anything else or is joined to anything else. I do not feel like my mind is part of a greater mind.
But how would you know if it was?
Would we not be able to share conscious experiences, to be more mentally linked and mentally synced?
Perhaps, but that is by no means self-evident.
But surely this idea will undermine the concept of personhood, and if we are all part of this hive mind, does that imply that I do not think for myself, that my thoughts are somehow controlled by this supreme consciousness?
I suppose you can do what you will, but you cannot will what you want.
Then this causes huge problems for the ideas of free will as well as personal identity.
I agree, but I do not think this is grounds to dismiss the theory. Also, if you claim that you have this complex consciousness, and you are undoubtedly part of the universe, then how can a part be more complex than the whole? Surely, if you possess this complexity, then the totality would be infinitely more complex. A quick note before we finish, if you would like to help support the channel, then please take a look at our merchandise store. We have some great philosophical merch that you will love. Also, the script to this video is part of the Philosophy of Religion ebook on Amazon, so make sure you check that out. And thank you to everyone who's helped support this channel so far. You are amazing and we really appreciate it. But that's all the time we have for now. Thank you for watching, we hope you enjoyed the vibe. And what does everyone else think? Who out there is a pantheist, and what are your main reasons for adopting the belief? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share, and for more philosophical debates, please subscribe to the channel. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.